All right. Hey, thanks you guys for joining me once again on Called Out. This is episode 3, and I'm here with my friend Arin. Arin is a friend of mine. I work with him in ministry. He is the guy that's in charge of the youth group that I volunteer with. So that's just kind of a personal information up front. But Arin, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, as always, I'm just going to have you start with give me an overview, a brief rundown of the things you've done in ministry, volunteer wise, vocational wise. What is it? What's your history look like?
Yeah, so my history for ministry is honestly kind of all over the place. I haven't been a follower of Jesus for very long, to be honest. I accepted Jesus into my life when I was 18 years old. I grew up in church my entire life, but for a long time it was just what I knew. It's what I believed. Like I just always been around it. I didn't know any different. So I finally accepted Jesus into my life for me when I was 18. And immediately after I accepted Jesus in my life, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going into ministry. I gotta. Um, Looking back on it now, I can give a lot of reasons as to why. I think the biggest thing is the youth pastor that I had at the time um, really really cared about me. He poured a lot into me, a lot of time, a lot of effort. I was an annoying 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. Um, my first week on the job, actually, I called him and apologized to him because I know what kind of student I was. So, looking back on it now, a start of my ministry was like, man, if this guy can do this and change my life, I want to be that for somebody. So I accepted Jesus in my life when I was 18, immediately went to Bible college because I was of the understanding at that point that in order to be in ministry, you had to go to Bible college. And also at the time, I went to the only Bible college that I thought existed in the entire country. So I ended up at Lincoln Christian University, studied 4 years in youth and family ministry. Um, Also, the summer after I accepted Jesus, I started working at a summer camp just to get a little bit of ministry experience before I went off to Bible college. Fell in love, like head over heels in love with ministry while working at the summer camp. Continued to do that through college, which led to right after I graduated, I got an internship for my degree working at this summer camp. When that was over, it was a 6 month internship. When that was over, I immediately offered a full time job, and I worked there for 5 years. So throughout 4 years of Bible college, 5 years of working at the summer camp, I told people until I was blue in the face that I will never, ever, 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 ever in my life ever do youth ministry inside of church. And now I'm 2.5 years into being a youth pastor at a church. So my journey in ministry is about coming up on 12 years total, working on, like I said, 2.5 years of being a youth pastor within a church and loving every second of it. So I actually feel like I've gotten a pretty unique experience of getting to see a lot of stuff, volunteering in places. I've gone on missions trips. I've served in homeless shelters. I've worked for a summer camp. I've worked for an inner city mission. I've served in all these places, but um, summer camp is really what rooted my passion and my love for ministry, and it's just blossomed into it's a huge passion. It's such a joy of mine to be able to serve as a youth pastor right now.
Wow, yeah. So do you feel like it was kind of like this, you kind of talk about you accepted Jesus, and then you from that moment forward, you kind of had like, okay, I'm going into the ministry. Was there ever like moments where you second guessed that? Like, was there ever like or was it just kind of was like, yep, whatever else I do, I know this is where I'm gonna end up.
Yeah, I have second guessed myself often over the last 12 years. I love what I do. I've loved all the experiences that I've had, but it's been challenging. So when I accepted Jesus into my life, it was a very similar, I see it all the time in students now where you accept Jesus in your life, where you have this supernatural. I was at a winter camp actually, accepted Jesus in my life, and I immediately came back just on fire. I was ready to conquer the world with my passion for Jesus. And I think that led directly into like, I want to pursue this as a career.
Hmm.
Um, I was all lined up, ready to go into engineering. Like that's what I was set, ready to do. But um, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. My mom being one of the biggest ones, where
Mm,
um, it's kind of interesting how my story relates so closely to the story of Jonah. Because even growing up in church, like learning and knowing and understanding so much, I had a lot of the head knowledge. I was missing a lot of the heart knowledge.
mm,
Um, and I felt this call or this drive to pursue my faith even when I was young, and I just kind of pushed it back and I let world desires and my friends and just being a teenager kind of take over that. And when I finally accepted Jesus into my life and accepted this bigger calling that he had, it was this like I I understand how Jonah felt. You know, you get this calling, it's like, no, not for me. You get this calling, no, not for me. Go to Nineveh. No, I'm not doing that.
yeah,
Go pursue ministry. Heck no, I'm not doing that. Like
yeah,
I can't. I
right,
didn't know what it meant. You know,
right,
I knew that it was there. I didn't know how to I didn't know what to do with it.
yeah,
So when I finally accepted Jesus in my life, accepted that calling that was placed in my life, um, it was it was that like in the grand scheme of Jonah, it was okay, I guess, okay, Lord, I'll go to Nineveh. But like ultimately, he wasn't going to Nineveh. He was going the complete opposite direction.
right.
And even though I was going to Bible college, I was serving in, you know, in these areas, no desire to do what I felt God was calling me to do. I was still running away from it.
Mm,
One of the things that I think is really unique about it is in those times where Jonah was even running from his calling and running from what God called him to do, he's going the complete opposite direction. The storm comes, he gets thrown overboard, he gets swallowed by the big fish. Uh, that sucked, obviously, for Jonah. Nobody wants to sit in the belly of a whale.
right.
Um, big fish, sorry,
Yeah.
whichever audience is listening, whale, big fish, you know, there it is.
Yeah.
Um, but you know that wasn't ideal for Jonah. But
Right.
at the same time, like I can guarantee that was the closest encounter he has ever had with God. Like
Yeah.
he's a prophet and he had this beautiful encounter with God. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, you're sitting there having this encounter with God.
Yeah.
So even through Bible college, when I was second guessing this calling, knowing that, okay, I have to push forward, when I was working in the camping ministry and I was loving it, but
Mm,
things kept coming up and I was second guessing it. Maybe I should have gone into engineering. Maybe I should have been a teacher. Maybe I should go back to trade school, you know,
right.
whatever that happens to be. Like I'm still, for whatever reason, pushing on and now getting to what I believe was my calling.
Mm,
I can see the beauty and the blessing of all of the things that happened, the second guessing, the working through, the struggle, the blessings that came through that, that ultimately when Jonah was spit up on the shore of Nineveh and he did what God would called him to do, he honestly didn't care what the outcome was. He just knew he was following God's
yeah.
orders.
Right.
And I see a lot of that now of like, I care about the kids. I
Mm,
deeply, deeply care about the students that I see every single day, but I also get to wake up every day and think like, man, what an awesome thing to say. Like God called me to this. He called me to do this, and I'm confident in that. I don't have any
yeah.
question. Like even now, the questions that I come up with is, okay, if I'm not a youth pastor, like I have no idea what else I would do.
Right.
I have no idea. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's really cool looking back at that. Like it doesn't matter what kind of struggle and hard and questioning came from that, because all
Mm,
it did was draw Jonah closer to God. All it did was
right.
draw me closer to God and closer to what that calling was.
Yeah.
So even in that second guessing, like there are still so many blessings that come out of that.
Yeah, yeah, man. It seems so. I think the thing that just jumps into my mind, almost a parallel, is there's this moment in the disciples' lives, where Jesus feeds the 5,000, and they cross over away from the crowd, and the crowd comes to find him, And Jesus is like, I know your heart, you're here because you want me to feed you. And then he starts teaching,
Mhm.
and at the time for us, we're like, oh well, yeah, we know what he's talking about. But for the people, he's like,
Mhm.
you got to eat my body and you got to drink my blood. And all the people left. They're like, this dude's
Mhm.
crazy. And
Yeah,
Jesus looks at his disciples and he's like, "Are you gonna leave too?" And they're like, "Where would we go?" Like, Jesus, you're the
yeah,
only one that has like, I'm with the
yeah,
crowd. I don't understand what you're
yeah,
talking about here. I don't get it. Uh,
yeah,
if I could go somewhere else, I would, but I can't. And I think
yeah,
that parallel for so much, like just hearing you talk about that, like I
yeah.
I don't have another answer. Like if this is it. Like
Right,
I don't know
right.
all the details, but I do know this.
Yeah,
Like this is the
yeah,
answer. You have life. You know where I'm supposed to be. And so I just hear
absolutely.
that kind of that same way, Jonah and that kind of almost a negative way. And I think the disciples in almost a positive way have been like, nope, I know you'll have life. I know you're the
Yeah,
answer. I don't know anything else. I can't really see all the other things happening, but I know those things.
right.
So
Yeah,
that that's
man,
that's that's cool.
we've seen so many like I mean similar to the disciples, like
Right.
I I can't fathom
Mm,
being able to with your eyes, with your ears, with your nose, with all of your senses be able to see the things Jesus did and still be like,
yeah.
guys, why don't you believe?
Right.
And like I can go back in the last 12 years and say like because of this and this and this and this and this
Mm,
like I've seen, I've tasted, I've heard, I've like
right.
I know it to be true and I want nothing more than to tell other people about that. So even if I were to like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm getting rid of the youth pastor thing. I'm going to go be an electrician. Like I
Right.
still you can't keep me away from what I feel like God has called me to do.
Right.
But one thing that like even in that I love to teach the students is you don't have to be a pastor to help
Yeah.
people discover a relationship with Jesus. You know,
Yeah.
you can be an electrician, you can be a teacher, you can be a surgeon, you can pick up the trash on the side of the road, and you can still help people discover who Jesus is. But I truly believe that my calling was to be a youth pastor.
Yeah.
I did some of that when I was working at the camp, but what I was missing was that like I'm going to introduce you to who Jesus is. See you next year. You
Right.
know, like
Yeah.
it's hard. Like you
Yeah.
develop such a like that's such an intimate experience, and then to not know what comes after that, like I really struggled with that. So I was craving and being pushed and pulled into this like I need to be in that long term, that
Right.
long game. Um, but like you asked in that question of like all the times that I questioned myself, if it weren't for people coming alongside me, friends, professors, my youth pastor, coworkers,
Mm,
my now wife, like I would have ditched that long ago. And through that, seeing the power of discipleship is crazy. Like I knew as camp was ending, as my time there was ending, looking at what I was going to do next, like it was very clear to me that I need to invest in some term of long term discipleship,
mm,
some way to make that happen. Because, like I said, if it weren't for my youth pastor investing in me at 18, I wouldn't have accepted Jesus in my life like I did. If it wasn't for Neil Wyndham, I wouldn't have accepted. I wouldn't have continued going through college. If it wasn't for Freddie Johnson, I wouldn't have continued to pursue college. If it wasn't for Paul Mulholland, I wouldn't have continued to pursue ministry. If it wasn't for Kara, I wouldn't have done any of it. I would have dropped out of Bible college
yeah.
freshman year to come back and be closer to home. Like,
Right.
but there was this constant pushing and discipleship and learning and growing that needed to happen. One of the other things I learned in college that I teach some of the students now that I think is so true to me, like if you don't question, do you truly believe?
Right.
Like, do you truly own it? Is it a
Yeah.
heart thing? Like
Yeah.
I want students to struggle with their faith.
Yeah.
What I don't want them to do is struggle with their faith and bottle it up. I
Mm,
want them to struggle with their faith and talk about it and learn from it. And same thing in this calling to ministry. Like I have struggled with it at different times in my life and I've questioned it and I've fought through it and I've sought the help that I needed and the guidance that I needed. And people have always been able to point out the gifts and the passions and the callings in me that I couldn't see in myself.
yeah. Yeah. It's a hard thing, I think, because we gear so much of our understanding of God and what He wants for us and His calling and like success, and so I think like questioning is hard because suddenly you're like, oh, am I illegitimizing um my choices? Am I like, do my doubts
Mhm.
or do my struggles suddenly prove that maybe I wasn't like I misheard? Did I mishear God?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
I and people, because even sometimes like you're like, oh well, people will still tell you to pray about, pray, well, you should, well, if you think you should be in ministry, you should pray about that. Well, if you have peace about that, then you know that God's in it. And it's like, yeah, sometimes, but sometimes like God's in it, and like I don't like ministry. It's not always well, it's rarely peaceful. Like it's
Yeah.
rarely
Yeah.
handed to you with like, hey, here's some ministry and here's an extra dose of peace. I mean, there's some peace that
Yeah.
exists within that, but I
Yeah.
mean, it really is a battle and a struggle, and doubts
Yeah.
and all those things are
Yeah.
part of it.
For sure. Those doubts and questions I don't see as lack of faith. I see doubts and questions as wrestling and pursuing faith.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really hard parts about pursuing vocational ministry is, like as an electrician, as a teacher, as a surgeon, as a police officer, like that, like, all right, there's a decent chance that things are going to be hard.
Right.
You go into vocational ministry, and there's an understanding that you are at war every single day.
Yeah.
And what's not fair is that war often affects not just you, but the loved ones around you. And you're constantly in this like, where is my role in this? How do I turn on my pastor switch? How do I turn on my husband switch, my father switch, my son switch, my friend switch? Like where do all those things come in? And there's the spiritual battle, and there is so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is any place in existence that can train you well enough for those types of things. Like you're going to go through med
Right.
school, and you're going to know that like you're going to lose patients, you're going to have emergencies come up in surgery. You're going through the police academy, things are going
Yeah.
to be hard. Like you know it, but you train and learn how to combat it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen nearly as easily in vocational ministry.
Right. Well, and I don't know that we even, I mean, so, you talk about going to Bible college. I did seminary even, and I don't know that like there's a rose-colored tint. That's what they say. You look at things through these rosy glasses, like, oh, it's gonna be so amazing to be a minister, and it is.
Mhm.
Let's not. I'm not trying to downplay that, but as an
Yeah.
18-year-old coming out of camp, coming on fire, like your idea of what
Hmm.
you think ministry is going to be is idealized. It's very idyllic. It's
Yep.
very like, look at all the cool stuff that happens.
Yep. For
That
sure.
yeah, I think there's that side of things where you're like, no, this is the hardest thing you're gonna do. Um, at times
Hmm.
it's gonna tear your soul apart.
For
And
sure.
all you're doing is just like holding on to Jesus. And so
Hmm.
I think that's like that's something that and I don't know that you can, like you say, I don't know that you can train, like how do you train somebody for that? Like
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
get somebody ready, like in a classroom setting?
Right.
It's almost
Right.
like you can't, you try to prepare them the best, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's such
There's
a,
no
yeah.
there's no amount of training that can prepare you for making a phone call to a parent at 2 o'clock in the morning that their son or daughter is harming themselves or
Yeah.
contemplating suicide or has an eating disorder or
Right.
whatever. And then hanging up the phone call and not carrying the weight of like,
Yeah.
now what? Like what's
Hmm.
happening? Like
Hmm.
there's
Yeah.
no amount of training that can cover that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where you come back into like, this is, yeah, but I'm called for this. Like
Hmm.
um like
Absolutely.
you lean into that because and I think that's the flip side. If you're not called to it, like it will eat you alive. It will eat
Yeah.
your life up because I mean, I think you come back to that just like the disciples, just like Jonah have been like, hey, I tried. Like Jonah, he's like, I tried to get away and I can't,
Yeah.
I tried really hard and
Yeah.
it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um and so you almost have this foundational thing of like, okay. all right, this is it. Like I've got to be in this. I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't go
Yep.
anywhere else. So
Yeah.
how do you feel like God is like you know you started obviously in camp or started kind of like
Hmm.
with camp ministry out of college, kind of doing that and doing that at the same time. And now you're doing youth ministry. How do you feel like God is continuing to shape your call? Like what is he doing to refine that
Yeah.
in you? And like what does that look like to have a call that's kind of
Yeah.
constantly being refined?
Yeah. I think one thing that's kind of unique about me and my story is from the very beginning, I knew right up front that like I'm not elegant or profound with my words. Like I enjoy preaching and teaching. I enjoy, diving deep into things, figuring out meanings and all of that. But like that's not my gifting. My gifting is relational. Um, I've known for a really long time that I can connect quickly with people and deeply, and that it matters. Um, so what's really cool is the way that God has worked through these last 12 years of being involved in ministry in some type. There's been a lot of like just unpacking and unearthing these things about relational
Mm,
dynamics that I didn't even know existed. Um, my original call into ministry that like solidified it. My first summer when I was 18 years old, I had a camper that I met that came out to the summer camp I was working at. He was 9 years old at the time. Um, he came out to camp. He was super quiet, super shy. He was in my cabin. We only had him Monday through Friday. He wasn't really talking much. But by the end of the week, I got him. He gets there Monday. Probably by the end of the day, Tuesday, a little bit Wednesday, he's finally answering questions and not just tagging along with the group and doing whatever. Thursday comes around and he'll respond to me, and so I can respond to other people for him. And like we built this close relationship.
mm,
End of the week, he left. The next summer, I came back and I worked again as a summer counselor. And one of the applications that came in was this kid. His name was Trevor. He was now 10-year-old kid. He came in and he had requested me in his cabin, and like that was already a big deal. Like we had known about him previously and knew that he wasn't the most social kid. The fact that he built enough of a relationship, one that he wanted to come back, two that he didn't even know I was there. He was just hoping.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
to a side note for that, if you're working in a camp ministry, even as a summer counselor, like the kids automatically assume you live there and you're there all the time.
You
So
own
he
you.
just
It's
came
very
back and
possible that you own the camp.
exactly,
That's what I
exactly,
always get is like, so you own this camp? Like, no, 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 no.
exactly, exactly. So he came back, he requested to be in my cabin. That summer, as a 10-year-old boy, he accepted Jesus into his life. Um, so I'm now about a year and a half into being a believer myself.
Hmm.
Um, maybe have led two or three other people to Jesus before this, in my limited knowledge of what I knew about that. And then this kid comes in, his second year. He wants to accept Jesus into his life on a Thursday night campfire night at summer camp. And we did. We talked through it. We understood what it meant that Jesus Christ is the Lord of your life, and He died on the cross for the forgiveness of your sins. And we worship a risen Jesus, and all of the things related to that. We prayed together, and it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. He left that week giving me a big hug. Thanks, Mr. Aaron. This was the greatest week of my life.
Mm,
I'll
yeah.
see you next summer. He
Mm.
just automatic. I didn't know what my plans were. I'll see you next summer. I'll see you next summer. So this would have been, sometime in June or July of 2013, and probably end of August, early September time. I'm at college and I get a phone call that tells me that Trevor was walking to school that morning and he was hit by a truck and was
Mm.
killed walking to
Oh man.
school.
Yeah.
And that absolutely crushed me, like
Mm.
destroyed. I just remember laying in my bunk bed at college, in a cement block dorm room
Yeah.
full of, I mean, I had four or five other men in my dorm, and
Right.
I'm sobbing, laying up there,
Mm.
like I'm mad at God, I'm angry, I'm doing all the like, God, how could you let a 10-year-old boy get
Yeah.
hit by a truck? Like it was
Mm.
the first like trial that I really felt like I had to face as as a believer, as a follower of Jesus. and like it tore me up for a couple days. And what I kept getting reminded of over and over again, and it was interesting how God works through other people, through messages, through professors, through mentors, whatever. Like some people had no idea this was even going on, but the ways that the whole thing of like the promise and the hope of salvation just kept coming up over
Yeah.
that course of that week, and just getting that constant reminder of like, yeah, it's not fair. It's
Mm.
hard. God
Right.
God wants your rage just as much as he wants your praise.
Mm.
But how powerful, how amazing is it knowing and confidently knowing that he's living in paradise with Jesus
Yeah.
because of a
Yeah.
relationship I was able to build with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I had that opportunity that he didn't get with anybody else.
Right.
Like I had that opportunity that I got to spend with him. Um,
Yeah.
I found out that through his passing, the like organs that he was able to donate saved the lives of many other kids, uh,
Yeah.
because that's what his family chose to do. Like that,
Mm.
it's not fair, but like after that moment and that hope and that promise of what salvation is, it was cemented in my mind that like this is the most important work that can be done right now.
All right.
Like I have to do this. I have to.
Yeah.
So through that purposeful connection with that kid, like God has really from that point on pressed hard on my heart to say like relationships matter,
Mm.
connecting with people in a deep way matter, knowing what is going on in people's lives matter. Like it's not just about, hey, how's it going? Jesus loves you. Like there's way more to it than that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not discounting any of the like. I went to church for the first time and I heard the preacher and I accepted Jesus in my life, and now I'm
Yeah.
going to be like that happens too. Like
Right.
there's
Right.
power in that as well. But
Mm.
for me, like because of how I accepted Jesus through deep relationship, and then God using a deep relationship through me and connecting with this other kid, like I've known since day one that like if I'm going into this, people matter big time.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to go back and see all of these giftings of like I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. I love connecting with people. I've even as a little kid I loved that. But
Mm.
how important that is now being involved in ministry, that just like the more that I get to do it, the more I get to be around people, the more that matters. And God's been using some really cool avenues to connect with some of those relationships. I think a lot of people in today's society bash on technology. I have way more connection with my students now than I ever did with my youth pastor when I was a student.
Yeah.
And just the quick access that with appropriate boundaries, obviously,
Sure.
that are there to for a kid to be able to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, Aaron, I'm struggling.
Right.
Or a kid to call me and say, Aaron, I just got a job. Like I passed my driver's license test.
Yeah.
Like I made the baseball team, those kinds of things. Like
Right.
the relationship built in that is crazy. I had a couple students the other day tell me that on their in case of emergency contact on their phone, they've got their mom, their dad, and me listed on there because if something happens to them, they want me to know. So that was one of those like,
Right.
great, that's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure.
Yeah.
um, in
Yeah.
that refining, like God has really just made it so clear that people matter.
Mm.
That and focusing on relationships as they're present in front of you matter. Uh, I take it very seriously that interactions that I have with people may potentially be the last. And
Mm.
what is it that I want them to know? What is it that I want them to hear if
Yeah.
that's the case? I tell people all the time. I tell students all the time that I'm proud of them, that I love them, that they're enough, that they're capable, that they're strong, that they can do it, that Jesus loves them, that they're more than just a volleyball player. They're more than just a dirt biker. They're more than just a musician. Like they're 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 a child of God. Like
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting thing that I've come back to because did youth ministry for a while and then camp ministry for a while, and those are different things, and you and I both know that they're very different. And then, but one
Yeah.
of the things come back to is just the for me, like the fact that yeah, you have such a like something that I never experienced, which was just like every kid has a cell phone, and like you have their cell phone, and so you can call them, you can text them, they text you, and
Hmm.
that's just it's a double-edged sword because obviously there's some social ills that had come from having technology and so
Hmm.
much stuff at our fingertips, but just that access to be able to be a support, and to
Hmm.
be easily reached.
Yeah.
It's good and bad, but that's one of the things that I think is one of those shifts in ministry that as I came back and started looking at it, it's like, wow, that's very different.
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of boundaries put in place for it, for
Yeah,
good measure.
right, right.
But I also
Wisdom.
like
Yeah,
one of the things that's yeah, one of the things that's beautiful about it is I can have a high schooler tell me on a Sunday night that they've got a huge test coming up on Thursday, and I can real quick throw it on my calendar, and like Thursday morning I can wake up and I can send them a text and say, "Hey, I'm praying for you.
yeah,
I pray for calm nerves. I pray for focus. I pray for recollection of the hard work that you put into this. I pray for um, whatever the outcome is that you can be confident knowing that you did your best,
yeah.
and stuff like that means a lot.
Right.
It's not just a passing statement that they say to me on a Sunday night. Like I take that to heart. I want them to know that, like, yes, I am praying for you. I'm thinking about you. I want you to know that matters. It's, like I said, it's not just a passing statement. It's not just a, hey, pray for me. Like, okay, you got it. I will.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's big because it's just a reminder that it's another data point, in someone's life, another relationship. I don't want to call it just data point, but another relationship to remind them that they matter, and not just
Hmm.
to the parents that sometimes it's like, well, I have to matter to my parents. They, you know,
Yeah.
they created me, so here I am. But that
Right.
that they matter to other adults, other Christians, youth ministers, just that somebody that they're lovable, that they're able to be loved.
Hmm.
And that's sometimes hard
Yeah.
for kids to even wrap their, heads and hearts around, that they
Hmm.
are lovable.
Yeah. I've discovered that, like you said, parents are supposed to love their kids. When a
Mhm.
parent doesn't love their kids, it's a whole nother level of trauma that we work through.
Yeah.
But in a situation where parents are supposed to love their kids, there's no way they're going to comprehend and understand that the God of the universe that they can't see or touch or can confidently know exists can love them if they also can't understand that somebody else outside of their parents loves them.
Yeah.
You have to start foundationally somewhere, and if I can show them that I love them and that they matter to me and that no matter what they do I'm going to support them and love them unconditionally, and actions have consequences and we'll work through them as they come, but
Right.
I
Right.
love you and I support you and I'm here for you unconditionally, and guess what, Jesus does too, and his love is way bigger than mine is.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, man. That's awesome. And I think so much that's the answer that so many people are looking for, in today's world is just that unconditional love that they don't believe
Mm-hmm.
can exist.
Yeah.
And yet, when we get to be the image bearers, we get to be the carriers of that in our clay jars and get to pour that out on everybody we meet if we take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me shift gears a little bit here.
Yep.
And for each time I do this, I like to ask a little bit different question. So for you, I did prepare you beforehand, so I'm not just springing this on you,
Yep. Yep.
as a gotcha question. But and we've talked about it. There's many things about ministry that are great. What are some things that you find that you have found to be most frustrating, or things that you see as frustrating that you've experienced, things that you see, things that anything along those lines for you in ministry? What frustrates you?
Yeah. So I actually feel like I think the easy answer for a lot of people in this position is like you're working with students and you middle schoolers and high schoolers and they do uh, questionable things a lot of times, and there's this stereotype that youth ministry is at the bottom of the totem pole and all of that, but like what has been so cool is like I haven't experienced any of that. So some of the stereotypical, like, oh, you're a youth pastor, of course that's frustrating kind of thing. Like
Mhm.
most of that stuff doesn't exist. But what I have found out for being a youth pastor, what is probably the hardest thing about vocational ministry. Actually, I've got two that I think are tied. So
Okay.
sorry to break the rules.
No, do it.
Number one is ministry is very lonely.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it's youth ministry is very lonely because all of my connections that I have within my job and a lot of my time spent outside of my job are with kids between the age of 11 and 18.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, as far as building deep connections within a church family, it's really hard to do. There's a line that you have to walk even between connecting with the students' parents. So you're not breaking trust of the students that you're building a relationship with, thinking that everything they tell you, you're going to go around and tell their parents because you're friends with them. Um, Even parents in some regard trying to say like, oh, I'm friends with my kid's youth pastor. Like I'm gonna know all the things that are going on.
Right.
Most of the time, even on a event going on at our church, like I am either approached by or it is my number one goal to go find where the students are at because that's the connections that I'm making. So I occupy so much of my outside time and my work time doing that that it's really hard to make connections elsewhere. Um, so the personal filling and the personal um, outside of work time connections have been way more challenging than I expected it to be.
Mm.
Number two, which I think is, I think a lot of people could say this one. Uh, my spiritual disciplines of things that I at one point in time found as enjoyment are laborious and feel like part of my job.
Mm.
Um, I'm working really hard trying to combat those, but reading my Bible and prayer is like I'm expected to do it because of being in vocational ministry. Like I think like in your position as somebody who serves in a student ministry role, like yeah, that'd be nice, but there's not that like, well, I get paid to do this kind of
Right.
thing, you know? But in my job, like if I were to go in and be like, yeah, I've just decided that like I've read enough of the Bible and I've prayed enough, like I don't need to do anymore. Like
Yeah.
good luck trying to keep my job. Um, and the hard part about like what I do is like yes it is a job and I get paid for it, but it's more than that. It's a passion and
Yeah.
it's a love. Like I have people question all the time, well, if it's a passion, you probably shouldn't get paid for it. Like no, I'm gonna get paid for it. I spend enough time doing it, I'm gonna get paid for it.
Hmm.
I heard a sermon a year ago that has really stuck with me. There's a story in oh, for the life of me, I can't remember what book of the Bible it is, but the basically this so there you go about being a pastor, and sometimes I don't know my stories in the Bible,
It's in there. It's in there though.
but right, it's in there, I promise. So the story was built around when King David came into power. One of the
Mhm.
first things that he wanted to do was return the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So he got this big caravan of people together, and he went to fetch the Ark of the Covenant, and it was being held in a priest's home. So he appears in this priest's home. He speaks with the priest. The priest has two sons. Um, David and his caravan load up the Ark of the Covenant. They put it on a newly built wagon. They've got one ox that are carrying it. They take it with them. The priest sends his two sons. And as this Ark of the Covenant is going through one of the thresholds of the palace, the ox stumbles and the cart shifts. And one of the priest's sons reaches his hand out and he steadies the Ark of the Covenant and he's struck dead immediately. And like as this pastor is going on this sermon, I was like, all right, where the heck is this dude going with this? I have no idea what's going on. But as he started to unpack it, like the power of it has just stuck with me so heavily. Where he was talking about these priests, the priest and his sons, like his sons grew up living with the Ark of the Covenant, one of the most holy and sought
Mhm.
after artifacts of the Christian world. Like
Yeah.
people in today's society are still trying to discover where the Ark of
There
the
he is.
Covenant is, what
Yeah.
is in the Ark of the Covenant, how to
Mhm.
like where's it at?
Right.
But these priests, the priest's sons grew up with it in their house. Like he made this joke about how like in classic brother fashion, they would probably like wrestle, and they like one brother would like take the other one's head and like push it all up against it. Like, I'm gonna tell dad that you touched the ark, and like they're playing hide and seek around it and
Mm-hmm.
tag, and oh yeah, try to
Mm-hmm.
come get me, touch this and you'll die. Um,
Right.
so then when it came time to move it, they missed all kinds of things that were supposed to happen in order to do it properly. The biggest one being don't touch it.
Right.
Like it, that was in an Old Testament law, don't touch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they did and they neglected all of these things, you know, that bad happened. You should have had more ox. You should have had a more sturdier cart. Like you
Right.
could go back and track all of these things that should have been different. But ultimately, this priest's son touched it and it struck him dead. Um, but the whole point of that is don't let what is holy to others because become common to us. Like that
Mm.
was the theme of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So what one of the things that's hard that I'm trying to combat every single day is scripture and a relationship with Jesus and prayer and fasting and worship and all of this stuff is holy to people that aren't in vocational ministry.
Yeah.
And just because we are called and are blessed to be serving in vocational ministry, don't let that holy experience become common to us.
Mm.
So that frustration, that constant battle is like, how do I make my time with Jesus impactful and personal and meaningful? Um, Not just, oh, I opened my Bible this week, you know, these last 3 days because I wrote a sermon. Like,
Right.
yes, that's great, but like I'm in Bible reading plans. I'm having to, you know, do things for enjoyment, for coming out of scripture because I need to.
Right.
So trying to not make the Bible a textbook, trying to, like I said, don't let what is holy to others because it become common to
Mm.
us just because
Yeah.
we're in vocational ministry.
Mm. Man. Yeah. It's so it's such a real struggle. Because like you said, if you're not in vocational ministry, you go, nobody, you say, oh, you know what, I've been off, I haven't prayed, I haven't really gotten my Bible, and people are like, oh, don't worry, you'll get it next week.
Yeah.
But the pastor's
Yeah.
like,
You're busy. You've been saving
yeah,
people's lives, right?
yeah. Like, and the pastor's like, yeah, I just haven't been praying lately. Like, we have some
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. You know, I haven't opened my Bible in the last
Yeah,
3 weeks.
yeah,
Like you've preached to us,
yeah.
like, you know, yeah. So it's there's a heavier burden and a heavier expectation. So
Yeah.
even in that spiritual disciplines, like in some regard, it's a spiritual requirement, but there's another
Mhm.
level to it that still needs to be a spiritual discipline.
Yeah, and I think like another like aspect of that, that I often see, and I think it's hard that people don't think about too, is that you're because your identity is wrapped up in what we do in America, and that's just the way it is. Like I'm not saying it's good. I'm not
Hmm.
endorsing that that's what it is, but it just is. Like you are a pastor, and that becomes part of your identity because what's the first thing we ask when we meet somebody? Oh, hey, what's your name? Oh, hey, what do you do? And so
Yeah.
much of your value in our culture
Hmm.
rests in that, and it's easy to get that twisted, with God, even to be like, have I done enough? Or oh, I'm doing this because, not because it's holy, not because it's a passion, but because God doesn't love me if I don't, if I'm not doing,
Hmm.
God, and then on the flip side of that, and just to add a little bit more into that,
Hmm.
is that we also are like, am I being successful? And ministry is so hard to judge. Ministry is like, sometimes you don't get to see like the seeds you plant, the fruit
Hmm.
that gets harvested. Paul talks about it like watering. You're the waterer, you're just there, you're pouring
Hmm.
water on it, but you'll never see the plants, you'll
Yeah.
never see the harvest. That'll be somebody down the road, and you may or may not even hear
Yeah.
about it. And so it gets wrapped up into, like your job, like there's just no separation, and that there's some joy in that. Like sometimes, like, that's amazing. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
I get paid to hang out with kids. That's pretty cool. But on the flip side
Yeah.
of that, it amplifies a lot of those other things of like, yeah, but I need to make sure that, like,
Yeah.
I'm taking care of the business I need to take care of. And it does,
Right.
sometimes it is, it's that's like this is my job. And so like you can lose, like you definitely can lose yourself in that of like doing, like
Yeah.
have I prayed enough, have I read enough, am I
Yeah.
doing enough for my job? And then it's like, is that really the
Yeah.
relationship you want with God?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I occasionally too run into that, like, hey, can you fix my kid? Hey, can you do this kind of thing? Like,
Yeah,
I run into those things, but like without like those are so minor compared to like the
yeah,
struggle that comes through the fighting the loneliness and fighting
yeah,
the continuing to see what is truly holy.
yeah,
It's really challenging to stand up every week, 2 times a week, and to preach to fifth through 12th graders about, put your trust in God, and then me myself not believe it. Hey, you should do Bible reading plans, and then me not doing myself.
right.
Like
Yeah,
there is that, like, I want to do it and I have to do it, but I want that want to do it to be a higher drive.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
it
And
it's
it can
always
be
that's a battle.
and it can be a struggle, and that's okay. Like
Hmm.
just because you struggle
Yeah.
with it doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
It
Right.
is it's real. Like, I mean, that's just I think
Hmm.
that Paul, like we talked about a few Saturdays ago with Paul in Romans, where he's like, I know what I want to do. Like, I want to do
Hmm.
those things, but I
Yeah.
don't do the things I want to do, and
Yeah.
I do the things I don't want to do.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
and that's the struggle. Like, and just because put on the hat of youth minister or pastor or
Hmm.
ordained or I have a Bible degree, I have a master's
Hmm.
degree, I have a theology degree. None of that
Hmm.
takes away that struggle. Like
Right.
that God's not like, oh,
In some regard,
yeah,
that amplifies it.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
4 years of Bible college, every single class that I took in 4 years of Bible college, it listed the ESV Study Bible as a textbook.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I accept Jesus into my life at 18 years old and go off to college a few months later, and then all of a sudden the Bible's my textbook.
yeah. Yeah, and you've got to do it for classwork. You've got to read it for
Yep.
a grade, learn it. Yeah,
Yep.
uh, yeah, and it's
Yep.
not like God goes, oh, you're a pastor, you're a minister, you're called to be a any of these things, teacher, whatever. It's not like he's like, all right, I'll make the struggle less for you. He's like, no,
Right.
it's gonna be as much or
I know
harder.
you read and study for a sermon. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think your
It's
first.
definitely there.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think your first thing is something I noticed a little bit about, like, one of the transitions out of camp life. Like, camp is so much
Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
especially in the types of camps that we served in, where we lived on the campground year round.
Hmm.
I mean, eventually you did. I know that not you
Hmm.
didn't start
Yep.
that way, but eventually you did do that.
Right.
And there's just so much a natural community that's built there. And then also it's just hard to find, um, as a pastor, it's hard to find relationships in your church that you can be real with. Um, and
Yeah.
that's, and that's even not even, I mean, you've got the kids, there's a certain boundaries there that you're obviously not going to share
Yeah.
certain parts of your life with, certain,
Hmm.
there's parents that, again, same thing. You're just not going to share,
Yeah.
the fullness of the struggles that you have. And
Yeah.
but then even within that, like just other church members,
Yeah.
there's a wisdom to just like, you don't need to pour all of your junk out in front of
Yeah.
every random church member that you have. And so there's
Right.
just a struggle there of and then
Yeah.
on the other side of that, like, sometimes as ministers, man, it's you just need to, like, complain. Like, you
Hmm.
just
For sure.
you just need to be David in the Psalms and be like, God, these
Yeah.
kids are terrible. These, this is,
Yeah.
my boss is, the worst guy in
Yeah.
the world. And be able to say some of those things, and
Right.
you just can't
Right.
do that in the a lot of times in the confines of church community, because you can't
Right.
you can't be that way.
You
Like you,
automatically never you automatically negatively affect their perception of
right,
other people or other things that are going on.
right,
Like just by being a pastor of the church, like it doesn't matter if I'm the pastor of the fifth through 12th graders and I build this relationship with somebody who doesn't have kids at all but are
right,
close to my age. Like they still see me as like, oh, you're the pastor of the church that I go to. There's a different level that I'm seen at or expected to be at.
right.
And like you said, like I feel like there is a major chunk of my life that I have to be guarded and reserved with in building that relationship, and that's hard. Like
Yeah,
I want to be in a if I'm building a friendship or a relationship with somebody, like I want to be vulnerable and open and being able to confidently and comfortably share all aspects of my life. Like faith is important to me. So like the things that I want in a friendship is like I want to be able to talk about faith and family and life,
right.
and
Yeah,
with in some regard building relationships with church with other people that attend the same church as me, like I can talk about family and life, but like work and faith are things that I have to be super guarded about. There are
right.
things that I know about people because of the nature of my job that don't ever go anywhere but with me. And
Yeah.
like even in times that comes up as like, all right, I have to be even extra guarded in this relationship, or
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
the natural position or the natural tendency of my position is, oh, you're a pastor, let me tell you about what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of like, all right, let me listen to you. um, I'll go find somebody else to talk to sometime.
Yeah.
uh, so as that's in a lot of ways it's a major blessing, like I can be that for somebody.
Right.
But I just kind of settled in the fact that like at this stage that I'm at right now in my life, still feeling like I'm relatively new to ministry and my faith. Um, the size of church that I work at and I serve at, like I just my my loneliness has to be combated outside of the
Yeah.
building,
Right.
and I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. I can build deep relationships with fifth through 12th graders and have have good relationships with other people that go there. But it's not super often that I will call, somebody else from there as one of my closest friends. Like
Right.
there's a whole nother level that has to hit in order to get there.
Right. Yeah. And it's not, yeah. And I mean, it's just a different kind of realm, than just, if you go, like you said, if you're like an electrician, like there's a different realm of that, that you can even leave work at home or not work at home, but leave work
Mm-hmm.
and go home. And with
Yeah.
ministry, you can't, in so many
Yeah.
ways. You
Especially with
feel it.
students. They're
Yeah.
in school till about 2 to 3 o'clock. And if
Yeah.
I get off work, leave the office at 4, most of my communication with them is just starting.
Right.
Volleyball games and basketball games and baseball games and football games and plays. And like that
Yeah.
doesn't happen at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. That's
Or
why
if it does, it's a weekend.
I've never understood people who are like the youth minister should be in the church office from 9 to 5. Like I've never understood,
Right.
like I'm okay with saying, hey, the youth minister is going to have some office hours and he's going to be there for those
Yeah.
office hours, but like
Right.
like he needs to be like his 40 hours majority that's going to be in the office. Like, and you're going,
Yeah.
okay, but what about like no one
Right.
most of the kids are at school. Like what do you there's some
Right.
prep
Right.
stuff you got to do. I get it.
And and
But
in
just to be
today's
there.
in today's world, in
Yeah.
today's world, getting in schools during that time is hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard to get into schools. Like I
Yeah.
used to have my youth pastor show up at our school and drop a couple boxes of pizzas on the table and say, "Let's hang
Right.
out." Like you
Right.
just walk in. Like
Yeah.
I've got to get clearance. I've got to get a certain amount
Hmm.
of time weeks notice. I have to
Yeah.
talk to the right people. I have to get background checks. I've had schools tell me no, that they just don't let people come in,
Right.
because of the safety concerns, but also like people are just cracking down on the faith in schools thing. Like I
Right.
won't say a word about Jesus.
Right.
I just want to eat pizzas with these
Just
kids.
want to hang out with kids. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so much. I mean, there's so much pressure. Yeah. It is it's so it's just one of those things. Yeah. I finding that community, finding that finding those friends, and just finding, the time then to set aside for your disciplines and to be double, because you almost have to be doubly disciplined because you're preparing, so you got to do well at that.
Yeah.
But that's not really your devotional time. That's not really
Yeah.
it's a double thing. So both those things, man, I agree, super, super difficult within ministry. Well, let me
Yeah.
give you one more
Yeah.
question, to
Yep.
answer, to chew away at here. If
Yeah.
you were going to give advice to either, we'll do a both um, and you can
Okay.
you can you can answer this in different ways. If you were going to look
Okay.
back and we had a magical device to take us back to Aaron, as he's accepted Christ, he's saying, yeah, I'm all in on ministry. What would you go back and tell him? And then secondly, and kind of maybe similarly, what would you tell someone who isn't for sure? They don't know if they're feeling called to vocational ministry, but they think they might be. What advice would you give them? So advice for yourself a little bit, but also just if you knew
Yeah.
somebody, they said, "Hey, maybe I'm feeling called to do ministry." What advice would you give?
Yeah. I think advice to myself going back, um, would be to, this is going to sound super, super millennial of me.
That's okay.
Um,
You are a millennial.
uh, would be to go back and to just chill, just, trust that God
Mm,
has it worked out. Like it's there, dude. Like I wish I could just be even telling myself now, like to just chill and to like trust God.
yeah.
Um, I think I spent so much time trying to be and do a certain way and trying to fit a mold and trying to, even now, like just trying so hard to please certain people and have it done a certain way. And ultimately, like we only have so much control in what we're doing. We only have so much, especially in the work that we're doing. Like I can introduce people to Jesus. I can tell them till I'm blue in the face about Jesus, but I can't make people choose to follow Jesus. Like I had a professor in college tell me that whole saying is you can't, I don't even remember how the original saying goes because it's stuck into my head how he goes. But like you can lead a horse to water, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Like you can entice them with everything that you have. Like
Right.
you can lead a horse to water. You can give them a salt block. You can run them till they're exhausted, but ultimately they're going to be the ones that have to decide to drink the water.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so to just be me, be confident in the person that God has created, and to just chill and know that God's got it figured out.
Yeah.
I think it would have taken a lot of stress off of Bible college. It would have taken a lot of stress off of the camping ministry. In the camping ministry, I think, like we we have to be caught up. We're fundraising for most of it.
Yeah.
We have, like, numbers are important. We have to be caught up in numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
as a summer counselor, and even as somebody working full time there, like I was so caught up in like, well, how many salvations do we have this week? How many first time dedications did we have? How many people returned for the first time? Like, and I oftentimes lost the power of like, wait, we had 60 kids come out and we had somebody accept Jesus in their life. Like that is amazing.
Right.
Like praise God.
Yeah.
And I missed out on a lot of that because I was just so caught up in like having to be and like these expectations that I was carrying on myself.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so telling myself, like I said, to just chill, to just trust that God's got it,
Mm.
to just do do what I feel like I'm called to do, and to just be confidently be who God has created me to be. Um, I don't have to fit a certain mold. I don't have to do a certain thing. I'm me for me, and that's who God called to be.
Nice.
So, um, yeah, I think in that, and I think for somebody else that's going into it, I think a lot of it would be similar. I think it's really hard, and if I were to meet somebody who was also 29 years old, trying to decide if they want to go into student ministry, if I were to just go up to them and be like, "Dude, just chill. God's got it." Like that's not helpful. As much as I want them to believe that, that's not
Yeah.
helpful. I sound like a
Yeah.
hippie when I do that. But
It's all good,
I
man.
think when it came right, you just chill. We got it. Um, I spent, I mean, Kara and I spent a long time trying to decipher when it came to leaving camp, if God was calling us to leave and do something else, or if God was calling us to be patient.
Mm.
Um, and we got to the point where God's going to make he's going to make it clear and obvious. He's probably going to hope that we listened a lot sooner, but he's going to make it clear and obvious.
Yeah.
What I would tell somebody is, if you feel like you're called into ministry, find some ways to step in and to serve.
Yeah.
Like, test it out, try it out, see what it's all about. You don't have to be a paid pastor to serve in student ministry. Even though I get to be in vocational ministry and get paid to do it, I could not do it without my volunteers.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I need people who are not in vocational ministry just as badly as the church needs a paid youth pastor. Like, there are people that are serving in student ministry that I asked to be in it because they're a nurse. Like, I
Mhm.
know you're really good at this, but you're also a nurse. And
Right.
like, if I see blood, I will pass out. So I need to know that this is going to be handled. There
Yeah.
are people that are serving that I know have concealed carry license.
Yeah.
As awful as that sounds, that matters in today's world.
Right.
They have a different thought process of securing a building than I have.
Yeah.
Um, so just knowing that, like, if you feel like you're called to serve in a ministry, do it.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in, well, I'm not reading my Bible enough. Sweet, I'm probably not doing it enough either. I'm not praying enough. All right, probably me too. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not this, I'm not that. It doesn't matter. Like, what I've discovered in student ministry specifically is kids just want you there. Like, the consistency, the
Yeah.
showing up, the communication, like, that's what matters. They don't need you to preach to Jesus. They need you to listen and they need you to be there. And when you have the words to say, you're going to say it to them.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. Well, Aaron, I appreciate your words, man. I this has been such a fun journey for me. Just listen to other people talk about their calling and then just talk about vocational ministry because it is something that a lot of people see from the outside looking in. A lot of people see some of the glamorous stuff that happens, like and sometimes they don't know. Some of the harder things, and it's the
Yeah.
same with it with all things. I mean, there are whatever you want to do with life, because of the fall, because of sin, um, work's gonna be hard. Like there's gonna be toil.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yep.
promised that.
Yep.
And so
Yep. Our
it's
punishment was to labor,
yeah,
was
yeah,
to physical labor and childbearing
exactly.
labor and all of those things. That
Yeah.
was a punishment.
Yeah. And so vocational ministry doesn't avoid like you don't get a pass. Like so
Yeah.
I think it's fun. It's good to be able just to pull back that curtain a little bit too for people to see and to hear and listen to that. So I thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a little bit
Sure.
vulnerable. Obviously not throwing all your
Yeah.
junk out on the on the
Yeah.
internet for all to
Yeah.
see, but definitely opening up a little bit
Right.
there. So I do thank you, and I
Yeah.
also have to tell you that you've been called out. And so
Ah, excellent.
I appreciate you joining me. And for those that are listening, we do appreciate you listening. I don't know how often I'll be doing this, but trying to do it weekly right now. So tune in next week if you enjoyed this one. Also check out the first ones with my friend Jim, my friend Travis, to hear some different perspective on ministry. And I hope you have just whatever you got going on. I hope that your week goes well, and that you're chasing after God with all you got.